I'm the chair of the BCO in Scotland. I have been for 5 years, all through COVID. And I'm stepping down at the end of this year, and I'm quite relieved to do so because there's a lot of pressure. But what happened to us at the BCO in lockdown was, unfortunately, one of the guys who had been a chair twice before me, a guy who worked for JLL, lovelier man you couldn't meet, he took his own life in, I think, July 2021. And we were just so shocked by that I actually said, we've got to start supporting our members. We've got to try and get some sort of signposting and awareness campaign regionally and across the UK so that BCO members can find help if they need it. And that's what I've spearheaded in Scotland. I have to say, the rest of the BCO, not so quick and fleet of foot to follow, but what I'm doing is actually trying to set a precedent and provide support and help for people, for members. And I think I'm an interior designer. I've been practicing for over 40 years. I'm a director in a firm of architects. And just as you said, Sarah, we have a responsibility when we're designing, that we need to be inclusive when we design, but we also have a responsibility to look after our people. We sell our skills, we sell our services, and it's so important to look after our staff, because we don't have staff, we don't have a business. And with that, I'm just going to hand over to our fantastic panel that are here today. I'm going to introduce them all. So up first is Ian Hamilton, who's the commercial director at Solus, and he will be talking from a contractor's perspective, but also you've run a very successful event in London, which triggered all sorts of amazing kind of results from that. Aurora Talon, who is Head of Women in Property, will be talking from her perspective and Women in Property's perspective about mental health and how important it is. Then next up, we've got Chris Hughes. Are you not hot with that coat on? No. Maybe it's just because what we were talking about, I look at somebody with a coat on and I get a hot flush. Anyway, so Chris is talking about his own personal experience with working as an architect and mental health issues. And then finally, we've got Joe Madden, who's next to me, who will follow Chris. And Joe will talk about his personal journey, which is very recent for him. And then finally, we've got Chris Stewart, who's the chair of the RIS, chairman, president of the RIS, and he will be talking his perspective, employee ownership, and also talking about some of the clients that he's working for and how mental health is very important with that. And with that, I will hand over to Ian.
Thank you. So Solus got involved, like you said, where you were speaking about looking after your members. Solus as a company has looked at itself over the last couple of years and really changed how we think about sustainability. And that's just not about product, but that's about social values and community. And our members really are contractors that work with us. So we decided to put on an event about suicide in construction. I think in 2021, 521 people in the construction industry committed suicide. And we wanted to highlight that, we wanted to talk about that, and we wanted to give something back to the people that ultimately we work with. And it had nothing to do with the products that we sell, it was more about our sort of social values. So we put on an event where we had 100 contractors come down to London, and we had a couple of mental health charities talking, and we had a lady from Australia. And some of the discussions that we had, things came out of it were about payment, late payments for contractors, subcontractors. We all take for granted that we all get paid monthly and that money goes in our account and we can budget and we can rely on that. But these guys, some of them don't get paid for 3 months and then 6 months and they've got to pay their staff. And it was all about the pressures really of what these guys were under. And in Australia, I think what one of the ladies put forward is that if you don't pay on time, the government actually fine contractors for not paying subcontractors. So there needs to be a real kind of law change in this country about how we look after contractors and how we work with contractors. And like I say, Solus as a company really wanted to give something back to the people that we work with. So we put on this event. It was an amazing event. It was quite dark at times because people shared their experiences. But at the end of the evening, we had 3 guys that came out of that 100 people to say that they were really struggling. Yeah. And you know, if the event didn't create anything else apart from that, these three guys, we managed to get to speak to someone and talk to someone and get something out of it. And from that event, it spawned with Sarah, who kindly invited us up to talk about this event. So this is kind of come out of that event. We've had another event in Birmingham, and it was just, you didn't realise how many people really want to talk about this subject. And that's really what Solus wanted to do. They just wanted to highlight it. And we're going to follow on this year with another event, which sees how far we've moved on. And unfortunately, we're not moving on quick enough. And that was really a Solus' story, really.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting one because actually subcontractors, they're the subby of the contractor and they're at the end of the line. And for them, it'll be the difference between being able to pay their staff and not.
Well, unfortunately as well, you have a lot of tier one contractors and a lot of companies that promote themselves as being, socially, but actually when it actually breaks it down, the guys on site, they're being really put under a lot of pressure, and all of that kind of social values kind of goes out the window, because it's about finishing a project and getting that project finished.
Yes, yeah, great. Well, thanks very much.
Thank you.
We're going to have questions at the end, if that's okay. So, Aurora, I think you're up next, sorry.
Thanks very much. I just wanted to start doing a little introduction. I'm a senior architect, and the last year I've been chairing the Women in Property Central Scotland branch. It's a great organisation, and just kind of wanted to start from where it started, because we are a multidisciplinary networking and support organisation in the industry. It's a not-for-profit that started in the 80s, and obviously the industry was very different to what it is at the moment. And there was a real need for support for absolutely everyone in the industry, I think, especially in the 80s, and the number of women in those times was so low that organizations like this can have helped over the years to get to where we are. We know it has changed a lot, but there is still a lot to do in mental health, and I think this year, chairing the organization, I've heard a lot of stories from women in the industry, from glass ceilings, from different points of view of the industry, from entering as students to the seniors, that it's less, lots of people dropping after having kids, and all the different type of struggles that we get. And it's not struggles that only happen to women, but women have an opportunity now to flag it up within the industry and try to fight for some real change. So the organization just creates opportunities, expands knowledge, inspires, and also we share a lot between us. So it's actually a great platform for people to open up. Diversity in this sense is a way to champion the change that we want to see in an industry that is pretty toxic at times, actually. And I think coming from outside, we kind of have a fresh perspective of that. Another of the key points in the industry, both in property and construction, is the huge skill gap that we have at the moment. And I think COVID has flagged up. And I read the other day that I think there's 1 of every 5 builders is above 50. So in the next 10, 20 years, there's going to be a lot of people retiring from the industry, and someone's going to have to cover the gap. And a lot of the young generations just not wanting to join an industry if they see it's toxic, and they see the people are very anxious and dropping down. So I got some statistics on the industry, and there's 15% of women in construction and only 2% are on site on in apprenticeships. And it's because like you were saying, on the subcontractor side and on sites, it's such a rough condition, the pace is complicated, so the struggle is at lots of different levels in the industry, and if we need to cover those skill gaps, we're going to need to improve for everyone. So that's the key push. And support has to go from primary to retirement, basically, to get diversity from all levels. And then, just a couple of points that I wanted to bring up, that bringing women into all sides of the industry, both construction and property, brings the soft skills and the social aspect of things. We've got a bit more focus on mental health generally and fair working conditions. And we want to apply it, like, again, to everyone. It's not just for women, but it's just a thing that we need to see in everyone. And the good thing that I could see from COVID is that it brought flexibility to work, and that has to come with the trust from employers to the employees. And it's broken a little bit that full-time work culture where childcare and maternity were always an issue because we were always losing back after becoming mums, or pushing it as late as possible, as I'm doing. So I'm not a mum, and it just keeps saying, someday, but you know, time's ticking now. So yeah, there used to be a lack of female role models. I must say, I think role models are really encouraging. There's a lot more female at senior levels nowadays, but it's probably still not there, and it's because it has to push all this flexible work and part-time working. And then on retention, basically. There was a survey last year on gender equality that said that 21% of women above 35 were planning on leaving the industry just because they couldn't work on flexibility. And it shouldn't just apply to women. Again, dads have a right to be dads. And I think that is one of the things we wanted to push from Women in Property, maybe push for more government support on policies that help families, not mums only, because I think that's part of the glass ceiling. We advocate for fairer conditions for everyone in the industry, promoting also self-reflection, confidence. We did try to do a suicide prevention workshop in the industry, and it was difficult to get the word out there, especially at manager level, because we all think it's not a problem that's going to happen to us. And it does happen closer than we've seen. Every time we ask someone, we know someone around who's been involved in some way or knows someone. And then, yeah, just to finish on a good example also, there's a lot of countries in Europe that are actually getting ahead on a lot of mental health solutions. And in the Netherlands, for example, I've got some friends where parental leave is naturalized and generalized, and a lot of men actually take part-time jobs at higher positions. So you see a lot more dads outside in the streets and dealing with things that we generally hear assigned to the women. So yeah, I think that's more or less the point of view of where we want to push the industry to be a better place for everyone.
Great, thanks very much. I mean, would you say, I know Women in Properties, you say it's cross-disciplinary, which is interesting. Mm-hmm. So you have lawyers, you've got project managers, you've got QSs, you've got all sorts of people that are involved. And are the stresses similar across the different sectors, would you say?
Yeah, it's interesting that our membership does change depending on what the industry needs. Probably. So at some points we have more architects, more lawyers, and we're trying to get more to construction positions, because most of the positions we see are professional services more than the apprenticeships and the construction trades, which is interesting because we want to get more into that also, because that's where the numbers are really, really low. Yeah. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
I think it's over to Chris now.
Hi. So for my sins, I'm also at the moment, as well as being an architect, doing a construction law degree at Robert Gordon University. And there was a point in one of the lectures that it all kind of made sense. And it's about how a lawyer views the contracts we operate under. And it's a contentious world. And the role of the contract is to force someone else to do something they don't necessarily want to do. So you sit there as an architect, you get your appointment, and that sort of outlines what you're going to do and for what cost, and that's the sword hanging over you. And you then start to have discussions with the contractor, and you're going to try and force them to do something they don't want to do, and you might get novated, and your risk suddenly changes in a sort of post-Grenfell world. You're suddenly carrying far more risk that your insurers now won't insure you for. So you sit in this world where you almost have to second-guess every decision that you're making. And it's that sort of environment, and I actually made some notes here, it's Part of the problem can be you start as a young architect and you want to make that difference. So you start with, I put drive, stamina and responsiveness. I'm going to do well. I'm going to keep on pushing, get my part 1, my part 2, my part 3 exam, which I'm going to do over 3 days and not sleep because that's what we do to get our part 3. The problem with that is you keep on pushing is it's a set of traits that can be rewarded. The company loves it. You've got someone there doing 50 hours a week for almost minimum wage. And the problem I had is that you carry that for so long, and you can only carry it for so long. Then you find yourself having beta blockers at 9 o'clock so that you don't freak out in your 10 o'clock meeting. But you then have to have another one at lunchtime so you don't freak out in your 3 o'clock meeting. But you still keep going because you've got drive, you've got stamina, and you're responding 24 hours a day. Then it gets to the point where the contractor's pushing and pushing and pushing. Stand-up arguments, and you faint in the office in front of all of your colleagues. But you get back up and you keep going because you've got drive, you've got stamina, you've got response, and that's what we do. That's, we talk as architects. There's the quote somewhere I saw, some people talk about their dreams and people walk into mine. It's that ideological belief in what we do that perhaps allows you to be manipulated. But you keep on pushing, and then eventually where I ended up with is I did try to kill myself in front of my wife and my children. And the following day, I tried to go back to work because there's that disconnect between the belief you have in what you do and sort of the reality of everything else. I made note here, communication versus understanding. So mental health first aiders, we can all have this communication. But take cancer. 20 years ago, cancer, people didn't talk about it in the way that they do now. There was communication, but there was a lack of understanding. And what I'm hopeful is that as a society, we can try to move towards that level of understanding rather than communication. There have been lots of things in the press recently. It's talking about, crisis or, what drove someone to do that. And it kind of reminds me of the Joseph Heller novel, Catch-22, where to continue to do something, you're insane. If you stop to say you're not going to do it, you're still sane. You can find yourself caught in a situation where the actual logical solution to you at that time is to kill yourself. And I think that's a concept that a lot of people really struggle with understanding. But sort of driving it back, I think understanding is something that hopefully we can move towards. But also the contracts, the late payment terms, the adjudication that was meant to be a quick dispute resolution that's now become a 30, 40, 50,000 pound legal bill. There are moves out there, partnership contracts, and actually start some quite novel concepts of insuring the project. Rather than every discipline having their own PI cover, insure the project, free individuals up from that risk that they're worried about, and try and get it into a situation where everyone on the team can move a project towards an end goal rather than trying to minimize their risk and push it onto someone else. So I think there's some quite interesting moves there that hopefully will start to become more commonplace.
That was great. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for sharing. Follow that. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris. So, folks, a lot of you won't know me. I'm kind of the black sheep, I suppose, of the panel and in the room. I'm not a designer, I'm not creative, I'm a surveyor. I've ran various practices in my time, and I guess that's why I've been asked up here today. So just a very kind of summary, CV for me. I was on the board of Watts, who are a big UK-based building surveying project management QS multidiscipline practice in the UK, and joined a firm called PMP in 2015, Edinburgh-based surveying practice, when they were very small. And I think with 6 staff in Edinburgh, and I joined and took over and led them through a really kind of quick growth period to 53 staff, 5 offices, I think, in that period as well. Growth of turnover 1,111%, growing different disciplines and hiring a fantastic team. And there's 2 reasons I mention that. One is because during that period we managed, I hope, to create a really good culture that was kind of envied throughout industry. And people looked up to us and wanted to work for us, and we'd done something right. And I'll touch on that briefly. Some of the things that we did right were encouraging transparency and openness throughout the firm. We encouraged people to be themselves. We hired the right people and trusted them, I guess. And we allowed them to manage themselves and to manage their clients and to manage their jobs. And mistakes happen. We allowed them to own those mistakes, and we dealt with them at the time. But at that time, I was running a firm. We'd come through COVID, I suppose, which is relevant for all of us. And from the outside looking in, it was fantastic. We'd gone through all that growth, and we were shouting about it on LinkedIn. And I love LinkedIn. But it wasn't all great. And COVID was tough. I thrived during it. I drove the firm. I set up the mental health ambassadors and the processes to help people in the firm. I personally phoned every single member of staff every single week for an 18-month period. The problem is, after it, how do you kind of encourage succession and manage that? And I didn't set up the processes to do that. I failed at that, which kind of weighed on me. After that drive, I got bored, to be honest, and where do you go after that? I didn't feel challenged. I was detached from day-to-day work, which I hated, which is why we all do the job. I guess it's to deal with people and clients and to see the kind of the fruits of your labours and to maximise your clients' investments and to see staff thrive. And there were a lot of kind of things that were troubling me at the time, and I was stressed. And I was a fee earner for the company. I was a business developer. That's what I do very, very well, historically. And it doesn't matter what the figures are, but I was bringing in a high percentage of that company's turnover. So you're responsible for all of that and for the teams and putting food on the plates. And when you lose 1 or 2 members of staff, they're all phoning you for advice, and their problems are your problems. That's just life. That's just the job. But I struggled. Gillian mentioned her friend, who we respected massively, who took his own life in July 2021. In the last 6 years, I've been to 14 funerals of friends, late 40s, early 50s, not all suicide, but people who have struggled, and heart problems, blood pressure problems, and people who have struggled with mental health. And that's far too many, all male. And that year I decided, you know what, I can't do this anymore. I'm going to quit. I'm going to take time out. And I absolutely shat it, to be honest, excuse the language, because how do you do that? But I was very, very fortunate. I managed to create a situation where I could take some time out, which was fantastic, and I would never take back. And I took a year off work, and that allowed me to reset, and it's created, you know, a part of me that's more reflective, I guess, and somebody that can make decisions quite quickly now. I didn't always kind of have that in my armoury. But that was tough as well when I kind of took time out, and I'd encourage it for MD. I'd never take it back, whether it's 6 weeks or 3 months or 6 months. I'd encourage people to take time out occasionally when you're feeling it. A year was a long time, and I went through the process of detachment and trying to switch off, and then feeling kind of loss and, you know, lack of purpose, lack of placement, lack of responsibility. What was my kind of role in life? Didn't know. Travelled a lot. It was great. It was magic. It looked great on Instagram. I came off LinkedIn for 6 months, and that again made me think, you know, I don't know anything about property anymore. And some of my female friends have said, Joe, fucking grow up. We've done this for our entire lives. This is maternity leave that you've been on. It was my choice. But it genuinely, and during that year, I thought I'd do what I've done now, which is my own practice and just trying to balance and kind of work directly for clients. I completely lost confidence during that year off. I thought, who's going to remember Joe Madden? Who's going to give me work? Who's going to trust me? Why would they think I could still do the job that I used to do 20 years ago? So I took a role at another firm, perfectly good firm, but a different culture to what I was used to. And something I just couldn't fit into, something I was never really going to be happy with. And that created its own stresses again of kind of meeting the same demands that I'd had at PMP before and bringing in work and attending bloody dozens of meetings and dressing appropriately. And it just wasn't for me. And last year it almost drove me crazy. And I managed to find the time and the people in my life to talk about my challenges, and with their help, I encouraged myself to kind of think, you know what, it's time to quit again and to just do what you always intended to do and to work for yourself, which is what I had to do. I'm loving it now. But what I would say is, at that time, you know, I had various challenges. Some were personal, very personal, some were professional. There wasn't one person who I could speak to about all of those problems, and that created a real block in my mind. But there were 6 people I could speak to about small parts of those problems, and they all managed to help. So I suppose that's in a nutshell. Yeah, open book. There's loads of problems there and challenges.
Yeah, and lots of kind of key learnings for yourself, and I suppose for everybody here, having a support network, actually finding these people that can give you that sage advice that we talked about the other day, and finding people that can encourage and support is really important. Great. Well, thanks, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you.
And finally, we're over to Chris Stewart. Thanks, Chris.
Hello. Yeah. Well, thanks very much. Yeah, I'm the president of the Royal Incorporated. It was a hugely grandiose title, and which I don't justify at all. I'm probably going to speak more as my kind of role as perhaps at collective architecture more than the RS. But and I'm very happy to, because I do sit in the Scottish Government Procurement Reform Steering Group, which deals with a lot of the issues that you've been describing here, and we are working with our insurance companies on RS Insurance Services on project insurance and how we can actually introduce that into the industry, and mediation over adjudication. So if we wanted to talk about these things, I'm very happy to do so. But I'm kind of come along because I thought I'd maybe talk about 3 chinks of light. Maybe that I've been kind of experiencing, and I do feel very humbled now, actually, that I'm going to go down this kind of path, but I thought it might be the case, and a lot of it has to do with responsibility. And the 3 chinks of light I was going to maybe talk about was employee ownership, passive house, and a thing called happiness and helplessness, where we're working with the medical profession across the city of Glasgow at the moment. I mean, the first thing is employee ownership, and that is very much a collective architecture kind of thing. So it was back in 2007, and I totally agree with the long hours, low fees, and these are things we're trying to combat as much as we possibly can, especially through that Scottish Government Steering Group, which I sit on. But back then, you know, we talked about this, and I can see Pete's there at the front there, so I have a fellow collective architecture comrade in the room. We took the decision to go into employee ownership back in 2007, and we are completely transparent in the way that we work as a company, and we all equally own the company itself. But when we actually made that move to become employee owned, and it was the process I went through, discussing it with everybody, it wasn't necessarily those issues which were the big thing for us. The biggest thing for us was intellectual property. That was huge for everybody that worked for us. It was the fact that we were able to own our designs, so that each person actually was own the actual physical work that you actually did and the work that you came out with. It's such an important thing for architects. And that hasn't always been the case, and it's never really been the case in the construction industry. And we all know it's not a master-servant kind of approach, which we're all kind of used to. It is very much the case that it's not just one person designs or builds a building and should necessarily take that kind of credit. So that's something that we totally believe in collective architecture, and which we promote across the whole of the construction industry. So if we enter awards, for example, and we do all right in these, we'll list all the contractors that work with us, we'll list the trades that work for us, we'll list all these sort of things, so make sure that these people are credited when a building that we come to produce actually gets there. So that is kind of essential to us. And what is a kind of another huge part of collective architecture and the way that we kind of work as employees is the buildings and the projects that we work on. And we work very much, we're value based, as are most employee ownership companies. So we have a set of values which we strictly adhere to. And so any project we do, and I realise that's maybe we might be in some sort of position of I don't want to say entitled, but lucky that we can actually do that. But if we do a project, it has to be a building or project of social responsibility. So that is one of our values when we actually go about work. So I think there's these aspects of us make us, and the way we work together and we discuss everything, and we're completely transparent, and we each look after each other, and we each look after each other's work. Is kind of crucial. And employee ownership is on the increase, and I think employee ownership works particularly well for design consultants. So that was one chink of light I would like to mention. The other chink of light is I'm also a passive house designer. And I think passive house, everybody thinks of passive house as being just a matter of airtightness, form factor, insulation levels, and it's very much a technical kind of standard. And I also sit in the group who are looking at the Passive House Equivalent Bill, which is working its way through Scotland at the moment, so that every single building, new building in Scotland from about 9 months' time will be passive house, or our equivalent that we're evolving through the British Standards, the Building Standards Division. But it's not a technical. It's not a technical aspect. It is basically quality control. That's what passive house is. It's a quality control. So, and it's a cultural change. It's a no-blame culture. So I spend my time doing a lot of work on sites with contractors, inducting them and explaining to them when I actually come along and photograph something. I'm not photographing it because it's wrong and I'm going to give you a doing. It's because it's right, and I will validate that for you. That then becomes part of the process. So what they're seeing is something that's done right is getting recorded, not the things that are done wrong. And that is kind of huge. And in passive house projects, we've seen the mental health of contractors improve. That's a fact. So that's actually improved in passive house because they worry endlessly about it. And these are just passive house things. It's air tightness and it's perhaps to do with the quality scope. But we're also now catching fire stops, and we're catching structural ties. And that is something else which is working its way into the construction industry. Got very much down to things like Grenfell and walls falling off of schools in Edinburgh. So there is now going to be a validation process, and we've already started on pilots of these. So these are all underway. I don't particularly necessarily like it because I think it's going to place even more responsibility on architects to actually start validating these aspects of the project, which will bring more responsibility. But it's helping a lot of people sleep at night in the fact that we're photographing things which are done right. And the amount of people that worry about the things that happen in Grenfell, you would not believe. I've got lots and lots of letters and emails about that. So that kind of process is going to help the mental health of the construction industry. And that will find its way into the building standards because we're already working on that to find its way. And that's the quality assurance is the biggest aspect that we're finding difficult. To tell you the truth, air tightness and insulation levels, our building standards are already up, getting close to kind of passive house levels anyway, but it's the quality assurance part of it, which is probably the biggest thing. And that culture, that no-blame culture, how do you actually filter that into so we can start to build it in the legislation, which is the kind of things that people are talking about. And the other thing we're working on at the moment is a thing called happiness or helplessness. And here we're working with the medical profession across the country. Everybody knows about the Glasgow effect and life expectancy in East Glasgow is probably the lowest. Well, it is the lowest in Europe. And if anything, life expectancy in Scotland is actually dropping at the moment, which is another thing. We won't even go on to fuel poverty, but this is now how we start to work with the public themselves. The architects tend to deal in vision. They tend to deal in happiness. That's the way we work. But doctors deal in a thing called helplessness and a thing called learned helplessness and even a thing called structured helplessness, which is when people living in, let's say, shithole estates in Glasgow have got nowhere to go. So we now have to start working to remove the helplessness from these communities, which is a different thing altogether. It's poverty which is the problem. It's not necessarily bad diet or alcoholism. So us, on the other hand, deal with vision and we deal with happiness, which I would completely agree with because I think we've got to be optimistic. But we've now kind of got to the point that the public have completely lost trust with the architectural profession, I think, and we go into these estates and nothing happens. So we go through a whole series of consultation and nothing else ever happens. It's now essential, and we're experiencing community consultation fatigue. So then we actually go in and have a series of events. We might get 2 or 3 people turning up when we used to get perhaps 100. So we have to now start thinking, architects as well, how we start the buildings that we produce are actually meaningful, I think, and I think that actually goes back to the values that I talked about back then. I think it's really important for architects to start to think along. I'm starting to just waver off piste here, by the way, actually, when it kind of caught me on these kind of subjects. So I'll maybe kind of bring that to a kind of help to an end. And people are very welcome to kind of pose questions with me on that. But we are working with the medical profession now. We have to turn this around, because at the moment we have to find ways of actually participating through Shelley Arnstein's ladder participation, whatever you want to call it, and move towards co-design and the way that we work with the public in that kind of terms. So there's a bit of a rant there at the end, I must apologise. But there's just perhaps where I see there's kind of three chinks of light where the architecture profession is moving forward to combat a whole realm of things. It's not just mental health, it's a holistic thing. It's down to the work you do, the respect you get, and of course, for me, spending more time with your family, which would make us all a lot happier, I'm quite sure. So anyway, there you are.
That's great. Thanks very much, Chris. I mean, very interesting, your views or highlighting the fact that actually our profession as architects, people don't trust us. And
I think it's at a low ebb, I think.
Yeah. And I was just wondering, do you stay in touch with the communities that you work with? And we've done a B2B with you guys, and really impressive about the way you engage. And
yeah, I started this morning at 9 a.m. and I've just been walking for 6 or 7 hours, and I'm straight here from walking across Cardonald, Bellahouston, and Penny So I've just spent that and come straight here on a train to Glasgow Central. So I've just been walking around the communities right now, trying to make contacts, trying to make contacts at grassroots level.
Yeah.
So because that now that we go along and nobody actually wants to. I would say this is urban. And Scotland is, and 80% people live in cities. In the rural areas, we find the opposite. We actually find that people will come and talk to us. Mm-hmm. So now we have to go and find out where the grassroots projects are, where are the things that are happening, and we build on those. So it's very much a bottom-up process. So that's what I've been doing today, is wandering around a thing called neighbourhood natters, Penny Industrial Estate. I've been doing that all day. It's a thing called livable neighbourhoods we're building up in Glasgow.
Yeah.
So yes, we have to do that. We have to go out and find people and build from whatever they're doing. So
yeah, great. Thanks very much. We can move on to questions now. I wonder if anybody in the audience got a question for anyone? Okay, thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Kay. I'm with Michael Laird Architects. I look after the marketing. So my question is going to be on social media, which obviously connects quite a lot to mental health and well-being. I think it was Joe mentioned earlier that LinkedIn is a great platform. I'm on there every day. It is a great platform, and if you compare it to something like Twitter, where that's quite often an angry being mob, LinkedIn seems like quite a civilised place to be. So I wanted to ask the panel if any of you have had any negative experiences on LinkedIn, and if you would agree with me that it's a platform that's worth protecting for civilised conversations, where you're not at risk of a sort of social media pile-on of negative opinions, and if you think it's a platform that this industry can have quite positive discussions without that risk.
Who's the LinkedIn expert on the panel?
No expert, I've just used it prolifically at times in the past. LinkedIn started as a recruitment. I'm not a social media person, I'm not a marketing person. Started as a recruitment platform, didn't it? And then it became a bit of a kind of news sharing and sales platform. And I think that's where you get most use out of it personally. When I opened my Manchester office, we pushed a lot of the work that we'd been doing in that particular area, or for clients that we knew were active in that area for a period of time, and selling a good message. And when we were doing passive house projects in Edinburgh, we again communicated that and shared our knowledge. Not just showing off, but hoping that others would kind of jump on that bandwagon. We wanted people on the bandwagon at the time as well. So I think it is very positive influences. Ultimately, it's used by a lot of people to boast, isn't it? And to show off. And that creates its own issues for us all. And shit, what are they doing, or why are they working for my client? And lots of kind of nonsense that shouldn't be in your head that gets in there through social media. So I think you have to just be practiced at it. And as employers, I'm not an employer anymore, thankfully, we need to educate our staff on how to balance their use of social media, I think, and not just kind of leave them to it, because it's like wolves, sheep to the slaughter, sometimes. So yeah, I agree, LinkedIn still holds a place as a kind of as a good place, but it's swinging into the political kind of. There are negative connotations with a lot of the political posts that are happening there, and we need to protect it if we can. Can you protect social media? I don't think so.
Yeah.
You can control a little bit, I guess. I've loved it this year being chairwoman in property. We're really active. We've got a great team doing it, but it can also produce a bit of kind of social work anxiety to have to be constantly on top of everything. So this year I've had to take 2 breaks. One after 6 months. I was like, I'm disconnecting from and the only social media I have now is LinkedIn, actually, because after that break, I didn't come back to any other, but I think LinkedIn is a tool also to connect and communicate with people. But yeah, we need to still be a bit careful on the messages that are coming through. I realize also I've got some friends who hate it, and because I've told them, oh yeah, I'm there all the time now, check it out. And they're like, oh, LinkedIn, why? Because you need to build your LinkedIn profile, I've realized a lot, or you get a lot of strange information through. So the more you use, it's like everything, the more you use it, the more you see what you want to see. So we've got that danger always. So yeah, it's been a great tool. It's very useful and really encouraging. And when you start knowing the people in your circle who actually comment to your things, it's great, but we need to be careful to not get sidetracked only on that.
And on that point, we've all seen the posts, that's me leaving the office at 8 o'clock at night. Oh, you're shit at your job if you're leaving the office at 8 o'clock at night. And B, you're suddenly putting pressure on all of your staff to also stay at 8 o'clock at night. Get a fucking grip. So,
I think as Solus, as a supplier, we use LinkedIn as well to celebrate our success, but also to use it to attract people to come and work for us, because we're trying to put the right practices into place. We sponsor Build the Way with GPAD in London, where we donated, I think, £12,000 to fund students that couldn't get into architecture. So we use LinkedIn in not only just to promote our company for the product, but we celebrate the cultural things that we're trying to do for the community, and also to give back to the architectural community as well. So I think with social media, yes, it can be, like you say, somewhere to show off, but I think it can be used in the right way to celebrate successes and attract people. People want to work for companies that are trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks very much. Chris, have you got a view?
A view? I actually found myself using less social media because we've just become a little bit cautious about saying things that maybe people construe in a certain way, and so if I do previously use when I'm nearing the end of my term as a president, so in the early days I would say things in a normal kind of relaxed way I used to, but I would get a lot of flack for that, and we actually do have quite a lot of contentious issues that kind of come up, and the RIS do. This is more of an RIS thing than a collective architecture thing. We do have to have a lot of views, but when we actually start to talk about specific projects, it gets very hard for us, and we actually are debating that right now. In how can we actually discuss specific projects in a more natural way, whereas we tend to deal much more in policy. But even in the work in collective architects, we're finding that social media, and we have to be quite constrained up, because we're even getting things like conspiracy theorists now latching onto things that is a fact that can get and especially if someone is working in the 20-minute neighbourhood realm, it's hard for us to even start to publicise events, because we know that people will get organised and appear at these events and things like this. So we have to then deal with these things in a different way as well. So it can get quite difficult for us, the social media. So I've been veering away from it recently, but I'm hoping to get back into it quite soon. But I'm more cautious of it than I kind of used to be. So which is a shame.
Yeah. Okay, Chris, have you got a view?
I've got a slightly jaded, cynical one, perhaps, and I think it comes back to there's an awful lot of communication but very little understanding. Mm-hmm. I see so much that is company posturing, be it about anything else, mental health, sustainability, diversity. If an organisation has those characteristics within it, it doesn't need to go on LinkedIn and shout and wave about it. It's sort of stand-up gesturing. I think the issue as an individual is you always get tied back to your organisation, and it goes back to before LinkedIn, go back to the early 2000s, newspaper article. You know, you write an opinion piece in a newspaper article and, you know, you can get in trouble for that. There's an article I wrote on Edinburgh St James a few years ago. That got pulled from the website. There were issues with that. So I don't think it's necessarily just LinkedIn. I think there's always an issue of any communication that comes out of you as a professional. Understanding, I think, is the key issue. Organisations need to understand what they should be doing rather than saying, and individuals need to understand and have that empathy with each other. And yeah, mental health's a difficult one. People really struggle with it. So I've got an essay due next Wednesday, and I've got an exam in 3 weeks' time. Sit down, formal exam. Now, having been where I've been, I can't look anyone in the eye and tell you that I'm not concerned I might want to kill myself at that time, in that moment of pressure. And that's the reality of what I live with. But people don't like hearing that. People aren't yet acclimatized to it enough that they're able to process that rational, logical thought. So yeah, that's the understanding I think everyone's missing.
Yeah, yeah. And how do we get that understanding? You know, because if it's been been a non-subject for so long, so how do we try and help? How could we help in that situation?
I've got great faith in my son's generation.
Yeah.
I think that's what it comes down to. I think that there's too many, apologies to all the 60-year-old people in here, if there's anyone here, I think there's too many 60-year-old, or you look at my mother and my grandmothers, the attitude they had towards things does not have a place in today's society. But fundamentally, you are not going to change the behaviour of a 60-year-old. And I think what organisations miss is the damage that one or two individuals can do. Company can have all the mental health first aiders and all the LinkedIn pieces it likes, but the reality is they can have one or two individuals, if they put on a team, particularly a team of part ones and part twos who don't have the ability to say no. The damage that can do. My generation starting to have the understanding, and the way I see it, it's like Duolingo. You sit there and you're trying to learn a language, and to start off with, you're pushing a button. You see something in Japanese over here, and you see some symbols over here, and you try and piece it together. I think that's the stage I'm at. I can see a word, and I can see symbols, and I can make it, but it's a real challenge to make that connection. What I'm hopeful is that it's a language that my children are fluent in. That they don't have to process in that same way. It's a natural language to them. And that's for everything, mental health, diversity, all of these things. So.
No, that's great, really interesting. I mean, I'm over 60. And actually, I do think I have changed in my time, but I think what you have to change up here and here to really make that change stick, and totally recognise what you're saying about toxic people. But we have to deal with them and have the courage and support our team to say, I'm not working the weekend. And because actually I have a life and I give you enough through the week. So I think the more we can encourage our staff and encourage our managers to do that, the better. Sorry, that was a bit from me. That's a bit... Okay, thank you.
I've asked a question as well, as a pure female perspective. So the gentleman, you don't have to answer if you don't want to. But luckily, I've always been involved in testosterone-full industry, so I've learned to deal with certain aspects of the gents' attitude quickly enough. But as I'm becoming older, I'm becoming more aware of there are certain gentlemen that look at me and either don't take me seriously because I'm a woman, or they think they can try to bully me into do something I don't want to, or I don't think is right for my business, my events, and blah, blah, blah. I feel more equipped to deal with it now, but I remember 10 years ago, very, very first Designpopup in Glasgow, I needed Chris's help, my husband, to mentor me and teach me and support me on how to deal with one specific exhibitor that was pushing me and bullying me. So how do we help? It's not a matter of age, it's a matter of personality, it's a matter of, it's not just young girls that have got this problem, but it could be girls our age, just because they've got a different personality or a different life experiences. How do we help them deal with these guys? I say, sorry, it's not my problem, it's yours.
Personally, I think experience helps. So finding an experienced woman to talk to, I think, and having a network within your road. There's a couple of my colleagues in here tonight, and what's really important to me is having a network of support. Am I doing the right thing? Am I saying the right thing? But it's taken me 40 years. Not taken me 40 years. I've always been feisty. I've always stood up for myself. I've always sworn a lot, and I've always like called people out. Actually, I worked at BDP. I worked at BDP for 10 years, and when I was pregnant with my first daughter, we had an appraisal system, and I was about to stop and have Julie, my daughter, and so this was a kind of, this is lip service. So, and the partner I worked for said to me, "What are you going to do when you come back?" And I said, "Well, you can't ask me that. I don't need to tell you that until 3 weeks before I'm due to come back." And he said, "Well, I'm just thinking, because what are your plans?" I said, "Okay, my plans are to come back, because I can't afford not to work, and I like working here, and so my plans are to come back. But be aware, there's a legal thing. There's certain times when you can ask me and not, and I can tell you." And he said, "Well, you see, from an employer's perspective, employing a woman with a family is much the same as employing somebody who's disabled." No joke. And he had, his wife was a head teacher in a primary school. His daughter was really successful. And I said, "I can't believe you said that. You discriminated against women and disabled people without breaking breath in one sentence. And I'm going to tell everybody out there, you said that." And I did. And he came out and said, "I didn't mean that." I said, "Well, what did you mean exactly?" So I suppose, I think I'm a bit like my granny. My dad's mum ran a newsagents in the high street in Edinburgh, and she didn't take any shit. And I think Grandma B, reincarnated. So I somehow it's about, and if you don't have a Grandma B genetic history, then it's again finding a support network in the space you work at.
Yeah.
Or outside, and mentorship programs like BCO.
BCO, yes.
Even outside, that's what I was going to say. The role models are really important to just build up that confidence. And like you're saying, learning through the years. This year I've learned to say no. And it's something I really, really struggled with. I wanted to do everything. I have that passion that, I'll do it. And then you get called working all night and working another day. And then you're like, wait a minute, this is not normal. And then, so in my case, I had a mentor for a moment in property who was from Bristol, a senior PM that no one in my environment knew. She just knew from me directly from our conversations. So having someone external who you can talk to and say, actually, this is happening. They're like, oh, okay. They can flag you up that actually that shouldn't be the case or things like that. Yeah. And that was great for me to have that external support that is totally out of the blue and has no connection with anyone you know. Because even asking seniors, sometimes I've heard we had the same maternity leave and we survived. And then it's like, well, wait a minute, should we not be improving things, guys? Yeah. Let's make it better. And I've seen a lot of guilt tripping for moms coming back to work on part-time. because they're doing in 4 days what they had to do in 5 anyway. So they end up taking a lot at night, taking a lot, and I mean, I've not gone through it yet, like I say, but I'm kind of ready for it if I have to. But I know I have to learn to say no. So we should all kind of learn to say no and how to manage it, even as a team, because if you don't want to say no also because you don't want to put the pressure on your peers and your team. But then there's a problem on the way we manage projects. We need to assign more time and be more realistic on the times that we need to achieve things. And if, contractors keep putting pressure and clients keep putting pressure, but we just need to be more realistic on our times, I guess, and double it up always, whatever.
Chris?
Yeah, just, it's, I suppose, a bit of a shout because at Collective Architecture, our board of directors is more women than men on it now, and I think we're pretty much 50-50. But it's a great programme that Jude Barber and Nicola McLachlan and Suzanne Ewan from Edinburgh University was Voices of Experience. I don't know if anybody's ever come across that, but that's a great thing where they mentored up women who architects who have got a bit more experience with younger women, and they go through conversations and help each other. And it's something that's been going on now, I think, for 10 years. I think they've been doing it for. But it works amazing, and we're well, as Pete will agree, the amazing women architects at Collective Architecture, and we're quite beholden to. But I would have a look at that Voices of Experience and look at the way that an elderly architect has teamed up with a young architect and mentored that person through their own experiences, which I think has been a tremendous kind of project.
Great, thanks very much. Ian?
I think for Solus as well, our company is made up of 54% of women, and we promote more women within our business. We've just appointed our head of people is a lady called Holly Oak, and she's really campaigning in our business. And I think the way forward is to silence those older voices. A lot of those older voices in our business have sort of retired, really, and it's again a complete cultural change. So yeah, we heavily promote women within our business.
Great, and actually thanks Joe for reminding me that we do have a mentorship programme, and I think Jenny Mitchell's around. Jenny's a mentor, as am I actually, and there's a kick-off BCO Next Gen event in Material Source next week, next Wednesday I think, where that's been.
Obviously we don't mention Material Source in here.
Sorry. Some rubbish place in West George Street, sorry.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi. I'm Nicole from 3D Read, for those of you who have not nagged the ear off in the past. Chris, I just wanted to say congratulations. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so glad that you had the strength to talk to us about that today. It was really moving, really, really moving. And I'm so glad you're here. And thank you for your time. So my question, I guess, is a little bit along what we've just been discussing. I've kind of found myself in a position where I have some potential power to change some things, but it's not quite fully there. So how do we address it when we're dealing with beginning stages of a project where we're putting together fee bids and we maybe want to extend time, but we run the risk then of losing that job? How do we start having conversations with, it's not even so much our own directors or our own contractors, it's changing the mindset of clients who have this expectation that things happen overnight and the butt ends with us. We have to make that work. But how can we start building that into those things? Has anybody had that experience, and is there any advice that we can bring on with that?
Okay. Realistically understanding what it takes to deliver a project. Companies often have an issues with their staff recording the actual time. So you get to the end of a project, you look at it and you made a little bit of money and you think, great, we delivered that project, we made a little bit of money and it took X amount of time. Nonsense. You had staff working 50, 60% above their contracted hours. It's interesting that I've only just ever experienced my first employment contract that I didn't have to sign away my EU working time directive. So the first thing you do when you sign your contract is you're agreeing to work more than 45 hours a week. Why is your employer asking you to do that? That's where we need to be. We need to start being realistic about it. But at the same time, it's a commercial world. If you price yourself out of the market, then they're not going to have a job, and that's not going to be great for them either. So it is a very tricky balance. But I think we've got to be reflective about the projects that we've delivered. What did it really take to deliver it? I've worked on some big projects where on my team, 50% of the people on the team left the industry. There has to be, how do you reconcile that as an industry, as an employer? It's a loss, all that time they've invested and you've invested in them as an employer. That affects the bottom line as well. So yeah, I think be realistic about what you have previously delivered. Look at how you're going to manage that moving forwards. And use bin.
I think one of the problems you're going to have as well from a supplier looking in is attracting younger people to your industry. You know, I think there's a big problem from diversity of people wanting to come into your industry because of exactly what you just spoke about. You know, we've witnessed that and we've heard that from young architects that come through our showroom. I think that's a big problem for your industry.
Yeah, yeah. Come here, get paid for 35 hours a week and work 60. Who's going to do that? Yeah.
But you then naively believe that working for a star architect
Yes.
will do your CV the world of good. When you find out organisations have got direct links from their intranet into local fast food suppliers so you can get your evening meal delivered to your desk, that's not a benefit. That is a massive red flag.
Yeah.
But, you know, you're 21 or 25 and, you know, I'm going to live in the city and it's going to be great. I'm
not going to get my dinner every night.
You've watched, I don't know, Sex in the City or something, you know, I'm going to be a high-flying city person. It's not all it's cracked up to be.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that there's quite a generational change that we're seeing happening also. That a lot of the junior, at least in architecture, we're seeing a lot of the junior people at 5 o'clock, they're like, I'm out, this is a job, I'm 9 to 5 here. And a lot of the senior people are complaining about it. And I feel I'm caught a bit in the middle thinking, well, they do have a point, but there is a business to run. So I think it's an opportunity now to find that balance between everyone. I'm not too sure where we're going to get to and how we'll manage, but there has to be an adjustment in the industry to fix to that, basically.
Yeah.
And it should help the mental health for everyone to actually try to stick to the hours that we are being paid for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Chris, you mentioned about more collective responsibility for a project. You talked about project insurances, so it's not, or was that you? I can't remember. Both of you. So is there something about having, I suppose, enlightened clients that will employ a collective team that will collectively benefit from working together, deliver something great, and measure it afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, it's something. That was such a tricky question because I experience the same things because I do a lot of the bids for our company, and I do know that we're very often torn that we do have to win something, and keep the business kind of going. But we're also aware that there might be unrealistic bids for time, which was the one you mentioned, or time and fee. But what we've been trying to do is to build in some of that process into the way the bids are judged, for example. So yeah, a client may set unrealistic timescales, which is very hard. But we're trying to ask that there is things such as, like, first of all, a personal. For the clients that we speak to, actually really want a good job, and they actually don't necessarily want to put forward something which is unrealistic whatsoever, and clients vary in their makeups, but they very often come from procurement departments within companies or local authorities or Scottish Government who don't actually totally understand the situation that they're kind of tendering for. It's quite normal now for big projects to actually get awarded and the client hasn't necessarily even met or spoken to the architect. They're just awarded purely, and there's no personal. If I was actually going to run a big job, I'd perhaps want to see the team or even meet the team that are actually going to deliver what might be a school, for example, and a really important building for everybody. But that isn't really happening whatsoever at all. So there needs to be a change within client organisations in the way that they organise their own procurement, so that it does become realistic. It's not in our interest at all for unrealistic timescales to get set or unrealistic fee levels to kind of like get bid for. So there's quite a lot of work being done, and actually how do we actually go and start to like work with client organisations so that they change the procurement routes that they kind of take. And we're making a lot of progress on that in actual fact,
Great.
because they've had so many failures that as a result of the things that you've just described there, that they actually don't want that whatsoever. But it's not necessarily the people who will be working with the architects who are actually like choosing the architects or the quantity surveyors or whoever it might be. So it's almost like at a route level, we have to build quality back into the procurement kind of route. Which we all know has been completely dominated by price, and the qualitative element of it just actually doesn't even appear in there, which when it will be things such as what you might be producing within the time frames that you've got. But we were actually making quite a lot of progress with that through the Scottish Government procurement reform and then into the construction accord. And there are certain things which in 2024, moderated pricing, for example, will now be introduced by the Scottish Government for all government-funded kind of projects, which is a different way. I don't know if I've got the maths of this right, and I know there's a QS there which will understand how these things work in terms of like, but the way that price, and Scotland is probably the worst country in Europe for the way we actually judge price against quality. Price will win every time. And it's a real big issue for our profession, not just us, contractors, everybody. Nobody likes this. And so we need to start building that. And there's a whole other kind of factors as well that we have to start building, like annuality in the way that things are funded, and things have to become a bit more long-term in the way governments have been thinking that they fund these big projects. I realise I'm talking about slightly maybe medium, large-size projects, and the same things will exist for kind of small projects as well. But the annuality is a big part of that. Everybody knows right now will we be asked to do projects just because of the end of a financial year. And and that's when we get stupid timescales and whatever. And they're very tempting to do. But if the people that are planning these projects and now plan them realistically, because designs like that, it's a tiny part of it. But there's always that quotation about, I don't know, who is it? Abraham Lincoln was going to chop a tree down, and well, that's a bad example to give for an ecological architect. But anyway, but all these time he would spend 99% of his time sharpening his axe before he actually went down. So it's actually design is such an important, crucial part of it, and everybody's starting to waken up to it. So there are some big changes that we're starting to influence through the procurement forum, which will start to address some of the things that you've just described, because quality now has to start winning its way through above price.
Thank you. Great. It's great. It's changing. Like, here's hoping it's slow. It's slow, but here's hoping it does change. The other thing that I would say is ask for more. If you have a contract that says that you do A, B, and C, once they ask you to do D, E, and F, you say, yes, we'll give you a fee proposal for that. And I think that's something at MLA that we've been, well, certainly the Glasgow team have been really tough on. We did a fit out for we did a full a Cat A, B refurbishment for a big technical firm. And the whole project was underfunded from the start because they'd only calculated the cost of a Cat B fit out, not taking into account the fact the building was 30 years old and all the services were done and they needed to actually do the Cat A as well. If we hadn't stood up for ourselves and had said, we can't do this within this fee, we can do it, we'll need to have a bigger team that will focus on the Cat A bits, and this is how much it's going to cost, then we would have been expected just to take it in the chin. So don't be scared to highlight to the project manager or whoever that there is actually some scope creep, and we'll give you a fee for that. And we have the confidence to do that. I once worked for a guy that told me it's vulgar to talk to a client about fees, and I'm like, okay, is it vulgar when they don't pay us then? I mean, that's just crazy, very old-fashioned. So I think it's, again, encouraging people to stand up for themselves.
I would completely agree. In many respects, we find that kind of conversation, because sometimes it's a design build project, whatever. I know partnership projects were mentioned earlier on, but I've yet to work in a partnership project which has ever worked like a NEC 3 or 4 project, which ever gets close to being.
Yep.
They just don't seem to exist in my mind. But whenever we work with a contractor, they're much more open about that and much more willing to. If we've got additional time, that they understand that kind of process. So it's very much more of a straightforward conversation, but not necessarily with a client. I don't know why that is, but maybe it's just an understanding of value. I think can be different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you all for your talks. It's been really interesting. I suppose just coming back to Aroda's point about like being at the start of your career and there being more awareness around mental health and quality of life, but still wanting to do really well and still wanting to do good work. I was just wondering, since you've all done very well in your careers, like what advice you would give to generations coming up where we have the benefit of knowing to look after yourself, but still wanting, to do your best work. And what advice would you maybe give to your younger self would be my question.
Stay passionate. Stay passionate. Because we're saying it's a double sword thing where, some people can take advantage of that passion, but it's great to stay passionate about what we do. It's necessary and it keeps us going, but it's at the same time keep boundaries, because I think we were missing some boundaries years ago, and it's good to make sure we have our boundaries, keep thinking in your mental health, which we didn't used to think too much about it, to be honest. But stay passionate and take opportunities to do the things you like still, to keep you fresh in the industry and keep learning. But I think it's a good thing that the boundaries are being set and pushed, but at the same time, just keep that passion to always also step up to do things and do things better and learn from other people around you. Just and be humble about it also, because there's a lot to learn from the senior people also. But sometimes we just need to stop doing too many hours. Everyone.
I think I've always tried to do something for myself. I went to the art school here. I've always drawn and painted, and that's really important for me. And also, so I think just remembering that you're important. And I'm sorry, I'm getting upset, but it's just, that is what's really important. Remembering your friend network, keeping well, sleeping well if you can, eating well, and stay passionate, stay absolutely, have ambition and have drive, but it's not everything. It's about you being you.
Can I just say as well, I've been working for about 25 years, roughly, exactly the same as Jenny, because we came out of uni at the same time. I'd probably be exactly where I am just now, whether I had rushed the first 10 years of my career or the second 10 years of my career or the middle part. It's just happened the way it's happened. Don't rush change and don't push progress. It'll come, whether it takes 3 years or 5 years. Jenny and I have completely different careers, but we're both here running our own businesses. Jenny got there ahead of me. So, don't rush it. Just believe in yourself.
I would say I'm thinking more back into things that I regret or the things I wish I'd done differently, and I wish I'd been truer to my values, and I'd maybe so I would be. You know what your values are, I think, and maybe when you're younger you're still evolving them, and it does take a long time. I'm also in the over 60 bracket, which as well, but it's even still right now I'm learning what exactly these are, and I'm having opportunities now to actually implement them more than I used to. But if I had thought back, I'd say maybe I did certain things which I now don't feel I wish I hadn't, and it's usually relates back to values. And I also say this values and balance, because the other thing that I regret is not spending more time with my family, and there's a whole bundle of things I would view as success in life, which isn't necessarily architecture or our profession. But in saying that as well, it's a huge part of my life, which there's no way I have any regrets without going into it, and would never have given that up. You're going to make me cry now, by the way. So, but that's what I would think is having a better balance. I wish I had a better balance, and I wish I'd been truer to my values in the early stages of my. So I would be willing to have fought for those earlier on, and I have faith and belief in yourself. I think it's really, really important, because it's very easy when you're younger to not actually realise how clever and good you are, and I think have that confidence when you're younger, because I wish I did, because the people that are perhaps appear above you or higher up are also looking at you thinking, oh, these people are really clever and bright, because you all are. So that's what I would do, anyway.
And I think every day's a school day. You know, you're always learning. And what I really enjoy is working across sectors. So working between distilleries and lawyers' offices and tech firms, because you're always learning about the world, about business, about all sorts of interesting things. So that's what I really enjoy, is actually and spotting the synergies between just different client types. You know, so distilleries and science, you know, teaching, all of that is just, I find fascinating, and I suppose that's why I've been at it for so long.
Oh, here we go.
I guess this kind of follows on from what Freya was just saying, but I find that, I mean, personally, I was an architecture school dropout, one of a statistic of a number that's far too high. Loads of people drop out. Firstly, I just kind of want to ask why we think, why does this problem exist? Because a lot of these people drop out due to poor mental health. I myself am one of those people, and I came back, but that doesn't happen to everyone. And how, now in practice, I kind of see a perspective of how can practices feed in to students and make sure that they know that architecture isn't a terrifying, you're going to get sued for fucking up kind of environment that they fear, and not to get taken advantage of. How can we make sure that they know this is a safe place and how to set those boundaries? Because, you know, I see a lot of part ones, part twos coming in, and they want to, like Chris said, you've got drive, you want to prove yourself, but how do you do that and make sure that they know that they can feel safe in this industry?
I suppose it has to be safe to learn, and should there actually be more connection between the universities and the architectural practices out there?
That is something we're setting up, as a series of mentorship programs, and our GU are already underway with the first years with the students within the City of Aberdeen, that they now go and speak with practices at a very kind of early stage. I mean, actually, again, having working with the medical profession, doctors, medical students go out and they work in hospitals from the first year. That's mandatory, that they will go and work in hospitals in first year. Whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, they're not sure, but they do that, whereas it's pretty typical for us to go out and work after third year in your part one, and that's when you get first experience of what practice might be like. But we are setting up a series of mentorships at the moment with with the 5 schools of architecture. We've got 5 world-class schools of architecture, but I also think that architectural education needs to get less confrontational. We need to find ways of actually communicating much better between ourselves. The crit is just the most horrible thing possible, and we have to find ways of changing all of that. And another big thing we're finding in comparing the medical professions and the architectural professions is that communication is part of the medical profession's curriculum. So they will get taught how to speak to patients and how they can speak to patients in terms of diagnosing serious ailments in simple terms. You know, we don't really have that. So we need to start getting a better way of communicating between ourselves, but also the way that we kind of speak to the general public as well. So I completely agree. I've taught a lot. I part-time tutored at Strathclyde and with Vaz for a while as well, for like over 30 years, and it can the crit. I've always hated the kind of crit, kind of like kind of almost shaming people kind of approach that we have in architectural school. It was really bad for me when I was at the Mackintosh School of Architecture as well, which was quite severe back then. It was the Macmillan Itstein era, so it was almost like went hand in hand in the way that I was kind of taught, but it was never a good thing, I don't think.
And that doesn't actually happen in the business. You don't have a crit. You maybe have to present to a client on a pitch, but at least they want to hear what you want to say. They want you to get it right, rather than these two who just
I love them, by the way, but they did like crucify you.
Look, you know,
yeah.
On you go, Aurora.
The point in communication is really important. I think it should be a lot more taught in universities, how to communicate, how to establish contact. I mean, I studied between Spain and Germany, and the point on businesses being more linked to universities in Germany is everywhere, and it's a lot more friendly, I'd say, and people see the business as a friend, not like as a scared bubble thing, while in Spain is the total opposite. There's zero internship, and it's an average of 8 to 10 years, so imagine there's a lot more drops than here. And yeah, you end up with 30, at your 30s with zero experience, and a company that tells you to bring your own laptop if you can, because they don't pay for any license, they don't pay, so it's like the opposite extreme. But so I think here there's an opportunity of a balance because of the part 1 structure, the part 2 structure, and one of the key things is that all the students talk to each other about what they've seen in the practices. So I think there's a lot of practices who are starting to have a lot better cultures and a lot better, because it filters through to the students and they want to choose jobs. So I think in Glasgow everyone knows everyone at the end of the day. So I think that's helping not fix the culture, but improve the culture and the working hours and all this. So, yeah, I think I can see that filtering in the last 10 years while I've been here, because I'm quite critical of this coming from Spain and seeing how things are down there every time I go back. So, yeah, I think that's a positive, and just keep talking to friends and other students, because it makes things better.
I think what you've spoken about, people dropping out, and there's a fear in the industry from all levels, and that's why we lose people, and that's why firms have bad cultures. And it's removing that fear, which isn't easy. Chris has spoken about looking towards other industries, because our industry's terrible at it. We're not going to find examples in our industry that often of how to fix things. How do you remove fear? You trust people, put your trust in them, you believe them, you let them mess up occasionally, and you don't crucify them, and you support them for that. That's how you learn. You remove fear from transparency, which everybody's mentioned here, and we all have been lucky to work at firms where we've got that transparency. But I think if you remove fear from an industry, whether you're an architect, surveyor, whatever you happen to be, supplier, designer, it's removing fear, and it's encouraging that removal of fear, letting people be themselves, trusting them. Some of you might have read the BBC website last week. It was on Instagram about 4 weeks ago. Timpson's CEO was out talking about his culture, fantastic firm, and it was upside down management. And they remove fear, and they let the guys in the stores give away free keys and free soles, and I've had a few of them, because I've got an old pair of shoes that I don't like wearing. But in America, my favourite example is Trader Joe's. I love looking outside of our industry and looking at cultures where they remove fear and they encourage people to be themselves. And if you hire somebody, you trust them, and you let them...
Ask for forgiveness, not permission.
Sorry.
No, that's good. There's more questions.
This is how much we are enjoying what you're saying. It's been an hour and a half. You're still listening.
Wow.
Amazing.
You've run out of film.
It's just something I actually heard in a podcast the other day, and I thought I'll just share it because it relates to the whole perfectionism and workaholism, and how the person that was talking on the podcast had said it's such a difficult addiction because it is an addiction for a lot of people, but it's the only addiction that's celebrated. So I think when I heard that, I thought, God, it's right. And I think because it's celebrated, it's so hard to get out of it, especially if you're celebrated by your bosses for doing such a great job, and you know that internally you're not doing such a great job for your own well-being. So I think from that point of view, I really feel it's something we have to save ourselves from, in terms of we have to be willing to step above the parapet and really push back. And it's difficult when your peers, like you have said before, it's difficult when your peers are doing a great job and they're on the cycle and they've not maybe seen the light as such of how detrimental it is to your mental health. But I think we just have to get better at it. And I was actually also, I had a stressful work week a few weeks ago, and I was talking to someone about it, and they said, why are you getting yourself so het up about this? She says, yeah, do you know, if you were to die tomorrow, she said, your boss would be sad for a bit, and then they would go and look for your replacement. And I think we do actually have to put that into perspective when we get too much in our head about it. And it's not saying don't care about your work, don't put your all in, but you really just do need some perspective as well. So that was it.
That was great. Thanks very much. And I think that's so true. And one thing, I sat in, there's a company called Head Torch actually who work with organisations to improve their workplace culture. And they've worked with all sorts of people like, you know, John Brown Shipyards, the police, the armed forces. And they're very interesting. And they're one of our kind of BCO kind of connectors on our website. There's links to Head Torch. And I sat in on a mental health and wellbeing kind of discussion panel about a month ago. And there was a guy there from Baillie Gifford, who are big financial services people based. They've got an office in Edinburgh. And he was their head of like wellbeing essentially, and he had some top tips, and one of them was exactly that. It was perspective, maintaining perspective about what's important. But the other thing he talked about being kind, just be kind, and the final one was be grateful. I'm grateful that I work for Michael Laird Architects. I'm grateful that they allow me to be Gobby. I'm grateful for all of the clients and great suppliers that we work with, and I'm grateful for my team. And so I think keeping that in mind, say thank you. Say thank you. So many people work, and you know, I've seen people work the weekend and not even be told thank you. And oh, you've missed a bit. That drawing's wrong, rather than the 100 drawings that you have printed out. So I think just be nice.
Can you imagine nice or kindness was on your appraisal form as opposed to strength or resilience, which you mentioned earlier on, or winning X amount of work? If it's not on your appraisal form, put it there next time you meet your boss. Say I helped a colleague through a tough time.
Mm-hmm. And say thank you, and also say go home.
Yeah.
If you see younger people staying late too long, one day, why are you staying long? Do you really need to? Is it okay? You know, but if it's 2, 3, 4, 5 days, say, wait a minute, what's happening? You know, if we get into positions of power, let's use the power to help the people below us, because I've had that from people above, and I really think when I'm there at 7, just being really stressed to finish something, and actually someone comes and say, go home, you know, and I'm like, actually, maybe I should. Is this that important, or can I wait till tomorrow, you know? Yeah. And it's a little detail, but some little details like this actually help a lot sometimes.
Yeah.
Oh, no. Oh, my goodness.
Avro Cranston, Ingram Architecture. I'm glad that you mentioned kindness there, Gillian, because kindness, empathy, just knowing that you're not alone. You know, if you're an architect in a team, you're not the only one. You're building a building, you're building a development. It doesn't just mean you. It means you, your team, your colleagues, the QS, the engineer, the client, the builder. It means all those other people. And if you surround yourself with the right team, you can still enjoy the job. You can still enjoy the project. You can still enjoy being an architect, a designer. It can still be fun. And there's a lot of people in the room that I think they're probably thinking, you know, the girls over there that are finished at university thinking, oh my God, this is horrific. It can still be fun. And always remember that you've got a team around you. And they might not just be the team in your office. They might be the team that you're working with in the project. And, you know, the teams that we work with laugh at me sometimes. I'm like, no, let's just be kind to each other. And choose that team carefully as well. If you don't like the client, you don't respect the client, don't work for the client. Why do it? There's lots of other people out there. Work for people that respect you for what you do. And then you'll do a good job. They'll get a great product out of it at the end of the day, and you'll all celebrate it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Not just manage to get through it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And enjoy it, and it is enjoyable. It's fun.
I think that's so true, and I think the celebration and 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 understanding the real purpose. What we do is really powerful. Design is really powerful. We can create amazing things, amazing spaces for people that have transformational effects. And I'm just thinking about your kind of community-based projects, Chris.
Yeah.
I think seeing positive benefits that come out of what we do is really important. And it's something at MLA we've tried to do too.
Yeah, well, I completely agree with so many things that have been said, but I almost find it hard to say it in any better way. But collaborative design is just a huge part of everything, I think. I mean, it's very easy to maybe not include certain people in workshops or in field trips or perhaps going to collect awards or whatever it might be. But we find it so important that everybody's involved in these processes, because the amount of kind of energy that everybody gets from a kind of inclusive approach to the way we can design. And to tell you the truth, I'm desperate to find out more about co-design right now, because I think that really is the kind of way forward. And I do know that right now we're arranging a whole series of multi-generational co-design projects across Glasgow, which I think are going to be particularly kind of interesting. But that's the way that if everybody's got a stake in something and everybody's got feel they're part of it, they work so much better. And not necessarily longer hours though, because I'm a big believer that in no way that do you actually get your best work out of producing longer hours. And I think I did see that podcast, by the way. I think I read the same one. I don't know what it was. But anyway, and that has to come from everybody, the bottom and up and the top down. We should not be working longer hours either. So we should be like saying we're going home, by the way, and not be the last person out of that kind of studio and things like that. But a collaborative approach to the way that we do design is kind of essential and the way forward. I think it gets the best out of every single project every time.
Yeah, great, thank you.